in that Caltrain accident. We not only did we have regular resources there, we also sent our drones down there in the drone van. And as you'll see in the board packet today is a letter of appreciation from Caltrain. And I will say that just the abilities that we had with those drones probably saved the NTSB and the other agencies probably a couple days worth of work in which we could capture in just a few hours. And then just this afternoon, we didn't have any other incidents of significance until this afternoon. We had a structure fire on West Bayshore in EPA. And that was, looks like it was a fire in the kitchen and it was out, no injuries, and they are in the process of overhauling that apartment right now. With that, that's the end of my report, unless there's any questions. Thank you.
Excuse me, are there any questions of the chief? I can't, it's hard for me to see hands because of sharing the screen. Is anybody's hand up? It doesn't look like it. Chief, I had two questions, please. I wanted to ask about what are the rules we're observing now in the firehouses regarding masking and so forth?
So as it stands right now, there's no mask requirements in the firehouse. I mean, we're following the same guidance that the County of San Mateo has for indoors, like in our office environment. So currently there's no masking in the fire stations. The only time we're wearing masks is when we go on medical calls and interact with the public, in which case we're wearing our full PPE, which is an N95 goggles and gloves. But that's it on our mask requirements.
Okay, thank you. And I also wanted to inquire about kind of the politics of recruiting somebody from Woodside Fire. How does that work? And are there any hard feelings on the part of Woodside Fire or anything like that?
Hey, perhaps. So just we are, and again, being new to the organization, but from what I know, we do not do lateral transfers. We do not. There's a number of agencies out there, large fire agencies that are doing lateral recruitments and doing shortened academies. So we do just a regular recruitment process. Anyone that wants to can apply. It just so happens that a Woodside firefighter went through the competitive process and was successful in it. So when it comes time to evaluate whether or not the individual needs to go through our 16-week or 18-week academy, I think he had just gone through it 2 years earlier. And so there was no need for us to duplicate that effort. So we are very cognizant of the fact that if we did a lateral recruitment, it could really hurt our opportunities of doing joint academies. So we specifically avoid that. If that makes sense, Director.
And do we, as a matter of course, do we contact the other agency, or we just proceed as if it were just normal kind of processing?
Yeah, I don't know what happened in that instance. I know moving forward, if we have that situation, I certainly will make contact with the fire chief.
I mean, there's probably some legal restrictions. We can't, restrain trade in terms of human labor and so forth. But on the other hand, Woodside is our partner that we jointly respond with and so forth. I was just curious how that worked. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you. Let's move on then to presentations, item number 2. And I believe this is Francine who's going to talk about the employment development survey that she did.
Good evening, Board of Directors, and I just want to share a brief survey that I conducted. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now. Slideshow. So can you see the screen?
Yes.
Good. Okay. I conducted a employee development survey for a select group of staff. The survey was to solicit promotional interest and readiness the availability for cross training, and identify barriers into moving to a 40-hour or from shift work, and solutions for mitigating some of those barriers. The focus group that we sent the survey to was fire captain, battalion chiefs, and division chiefs. And out of this group, out of 38 employees, we had a response of 26, so approximately 68%. It was a very brief survey. There was 5 structured questions and 1 open-ended question. The survey was sent out and was anonymous, so employees didn't identify name or position title when they responded. And all of the multiple choice questions had the option of adding an other item. So in case the options that I included weren't how they would have responded, they had basically the option to include their own response. So I just did a kind of a little brief presentation of the questions that were answered. And the first question was to gauge promotional interest and readiness. I allowed questions for employees to select more than one if they felt that they were ready for more than one. The kind of the larger part of so basically 9 out of the 26 respondents were not ready for promotional position. Some stated maybe they recently promoted or they were earlier in their career and just not at that stage yet. 5 of the respondents were not interested in a promotional position at all. And then the remaining respondents were interested in the promotional position at either a division chief was the highest, battalion chief, deputy, and then we had 2 for fire chief. And just to note that battalion chief wasn't actually listed as an option on this question. This question was focused more on moving into a senior staff, which would be the 40-hour role, but there were 4 respondents that added battalion chief. So then I added it to the response here. The second question was to identify barriers into moving into a senior staff position. And the top 3 barriers identified were commuting long distance, the cost of local housing, and then negative impact on family life. Some of the other responses were the loss of flexibility in their work schedule, loss of overtime or a stipend, insufficient tuition reimbursement, and then lack of exposure to programs and budgets, no retirement incentive per PEPRA, a shift to purely administrative duties, and then the fact that there are no open positions. Some employees felt that that was a barrier, not necessarily just in this question, but in the open response at the end, that was kind of a common theme. The next question identified solutions to barriers. Again, I loaded the questions with some solutions, but then left it open for employees to identify other solutions if I hadn't identified the solution of their choice. And the top 3 solutions that might mitigate the barrier into moving to a 40-hour role would be an employer provided short-term housing during the week, say Monday through Wednesday night, an increase in base salary, providing retiree medical reimbursement. Those were the top 3. And then some of the others were to increase housing stipend, increase the tuition reimbursement, the ability to work down as a BC and earn overtime, increase PEP for PEPRA employees only, provide a deferred comp contribution, flexible work schedule, and then provide mentorship and more out-of-class assignments. The next question was just a true and false, and it was to see if employees felt that they had the ability to cross-train and learn new skills that would assist with promotional readiness. And almost 54% of respondents said that they did feel that they were able to cross-train and learn new skills, compared to 46% that said that they didn't feel that they had that many opportunities to cross-train. And then the last kind of structured question was if employees feel that they receive mentorship from senior staff that's available to their, or that's valuable, sorry, to their career growth, from a strongly disagree to a strongly agree. So three of the respondents strongly disagreed with this statement, 5 disagreed. The neutral was 12 respondents, and then the agree was 4, and the strongly agree was 2 of the respondents felt that they received mentorship from senior staff that would be valuable to their career growth. Then we had an open-ended question at the end to see if there's any other feedback that employees wanted to add. And there was definitely themes throughout the survey. Some of the more common themes would be listed, towards the top of this slide, is that many of the respondents felt that there was a lot of talented staff ready for a promotion, but that senior staff weren't retiring, and so there wasn't any available opportunities. Another common theme was the need for additional training to prepare a shift employee from moving from a shift position into a more administrative position, and that training was identified as needing program management training, finance, budget, and report writing, and then also leadership training that was thought to be needed and would help an employee kind of be prepared for a senior role should it come open. Some other kind of themes were some respondents felt that the promotional process wasn't very clear, that not the most qualified was hired, but it's the person that did the most recent thing or the best thing for you. That not, even if someone is ready for an administrative staff, that not everyone is suited for that type of position. Some respondents felt that the district doesn't need 2 BCs and that the battalion chiefs are not set up to run divisions based on their 56-hour work schedule. So I felt that the survey was very successful, that we received almost a 70% response rate. To a few employees reached out even after the survey to kind of discuss kind of candidly ideas and things that they felt would benefit kind of the employees movement, succession planning, mentorship. So it was kind of a positive experience, and I just wanted to share this information with the board. I'd like to kind of continue this discussion with the chief to kind of see how we can focus on sure that internal employees are ready should promotional positions open up, and that we provide some of this training that isn't maybe as tactical, but more administrative. So that's the survey, and I'm open for any questions if you have any.
I'm sorry, I had to shut my door. Board members have questions they'd like to ask Francine?
Chuck, I do.
Go ahead, Rob. I'm sorry, Robert.
Just point of clarification, Francine. In your report, you indicated that 46% of the respondents, I guess, didn't feel they are not had any cross training or no cross training opportunities.
Yes, so I put the question up that addressed this, and so just asking if they felt that there were many cross training opportunities that would assist them in their promotional readiness, and if they thought this was a true statement or a false statement. And 46% of the respondents didn't feel that this was a true statement.
Okay. So they felt, I mean, I take it from that they felt there was opportunities, maybe not a whole lot of opportunities, but there were some opportunities.
Yeah, it could mean that there were some, or that they didn't feel that there were any, but they definitely didn't feel that there were many opportunities. 46%, yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Other questions?
Oh, one burning question,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead, Robert.
Help me in turn, and maybe the chief can, how many shifts, is it my understanding there are 3, in any given week, there are 3 shifts coming on and off, and I assume they're working like, just throwing it out as an example so I can get the clarity, like a Monday through Wednesday, and then from a Wednesday to Saturday and Sunday to Tuesday. Is that how the shift, the schedule works in terms of people coming on and off?
Director, for our people that work shifts, we have an A, B, and C shift, and they basically work 2 days on, so 48 hours on, and then they have 96 hours or 4 days off. And so you'll see them, they may work a Monday, Tuesday, and then they're off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then they go Sunday and Monday. So it's a rotating schedule, so they're never
see.
consistently on the same days, and in a given week, for sure, all 3 shifts will work at least 2 days, and 1 shift will work 3 days. But it just cycles throughout the year.
And the value of that structuring, whether it's 2 or 3 days, is based upon economics or how much a
Well-
person can stand being in the fire station? No.
Sure. And there are opportunities. Sometimes people are forced to work longer or can voluntarily work longer when we have somebody take a PTO day off, and they fill in with overtime so they could work 72 hours in a row. Part of that I think was probably negotiated. There's a variety of fire service schedules out there. All of them result in the working of what averages out to be a 56-hour work week. And then we have these FLSA periods that could be, they're usually 27 or 28-day FLSA periods. But and part of it is, I think, especially for us here in Menlo Park, is working that schedule allows people to live a little bit further away in areas that are more affordable. Whereas if we had, if you were on a shift, off a shift, on a shift, off a shift, on a shift, there would be those challenges with having to commute longer distances. So it certainly is helpful for the, in the affordability index of being able to live a little bit further away.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Jim, please go ahead.
I just like to, I would like to ask the chief, how will you use the results of this survey?
Well, that's great. I mean, I've already started. One of them is just on the succession planning thing or opportunities. And Francine and I have already started exposing people to some administrative opportunities, much to their chagrin. But that's, sometimes they don't have that with it. Sometimes they're investigations or responding to a grievance. And we'll open up our budget meetings too. A lot of people have never prepared budgets, so we can open them up to anyone who's interested, in any rank. That's some of the exposure and opportunities, things that we've already started doing. And then some of the others are going to be working with the board on some of those solutions to encourage people to move up. Our biggest challenge really comes from people moving from shift work to staff work and trying to figure out ways to help them with that transition. It's very impactful on families generally in a negative way. And then also trying to figure out, as you saw, one of the highest priorities there for helping that out would be figuring out a way for the district to provide some short-term housing. And we work Monday through Thursday. So if we could provide temporary housing on a Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday night for those employees to not have to commute home or to rent a separate place, besides their principal residence, that could be helpful. And we actually are in a fortunate position where we might have some opportunities on 2 of the properties we already own to provide some of that. So that, I mean, we have some great short-term options to help fix that, that would, I think, help satisfy some future interest and even with some current employees there too. But that will be something we'll be circling back probably with the HR committee on some of the options that we can talk about implementing. So, I mean, those are just some of the ideas that we have initially. It's great to get that feedback. I think a lot of it just validated some of the feelings that I already had coming into this too.
Thank you.
Chief, I wanted to just respond. I have a question for Francine also. I'm certainly not an expert, but I have in this, but I've read a number of articles that talk about the detrimental effects of shift work on family life and things like life expectancy and quality of life in terms of Alzheimer's disease and so forth. And I hope we can look into that too, because while it seems like there's more flexibility, I think people who are able to be home every day with their families and see their kids every day and interact with those children and sleep a normal sleep without having to be awakened perhaps once or twice a night and so forth. I think there's some major health benefits for that actually do affect quality of life. And people don't know what they don't know. And it seems in the short run that you get more flexibility and only work 2 days out of 6. I mean, seems desirable, but I think that is another side of it. And life expectancy of firefighters is shorter than the normal population and so forth. So I think there's some other sides to this that are worth exploring, not to mention the fact that we've already heard that if you happen to be a woman and you happen to be a mother, that working shift work for many people just is out of the question. And so if we ever hope to diversify to the extent of having a woman in senior ranks, and I know we have that, so I don't want to make it sound like it never happens, but it's certainly a limiting factor for some people, and I just don't want to lose sight of that. The question I had for Francine was, Francine, I know the survey was anonymous, but are you able, did you ask people to identify their roles such that you could divide these results depending on what rank people hold at this point?
I didn't. I actually didn't ask any qualifying information. I wanted respondents to be as candid, as they could, and so I didn't. But in future, if that's something that would be beneficial, I can definitely ask for rank and position.
Well, I was interested in the point that Robert Jones brought up about the roughly half the people felt there were opportunities and half the people didn't. But I was curious to know if that was spread evenly across all roles, or if the captains felt there were no opportunities, but the battalion chief felt that there were lots of opportunities or whatever. So it would be nice to kind of understand the location of various problems and so forth. Obviously, that's something you can do on a follow-up.
Definitely.
And one more question. I was surprised that only 2/3 of the people responded. Did you get any feeling for why people didn't bother to respond? It seems like a fairly important thing, but
I didn't. I actually thought that was quite high to get 68%. I had it open, I believe it was 2 weeks. And I even kept it open a little bit longer. And there was one employee that was and said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't submit." And I said, "Submit now." I reopened the survey. So I was definitely open to getting the feedback, and I'm not sure why, there was some that didn't. But yeah, I felt that it was actually a positive kind of response, but not everyone for sure.
Okay, I guess what it would say to me if I were a manager or a supervisor is that a third of the people don't care about moving up in the organization, which would actually be kind of discouraging for me. But I agree with you. It's a pretty high percentage from a normal survey response figure. So, any other questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Um,
you.
We'll move to the consent calendar now. We have 4 items on the consent, excuse me, we have 5 items on the consent calendar. Minutes, the treasurer's report, the continuation in accordance with the remote meetings, the declaration of weeds as a public nuisance, and the kind of tally of how much money we have left over for California Task Force 3 budgets in the past several years. Would anybody like, well, first, let me ask for a motion
Yep.
to approve the consent calendar.
Chuck, I'd like to move to.
So move,
approve the
oh,
consent calendar.
I have a
I'll
motion
sec,
from
I'll
Rob,
second that.
a second from Virginia. Would anybody like to remove anything from the consent calendar?
Chuck, I have a question on the finance report, and it's a quick question. So I guess in order to, rather than consistently, and if I can get an answer to that, I'm good with everything else, but I just have that one question.
It's probably the most efficient if, particularly for our clerk, if you can ask the question and then we don't have to separate all these things. So go ahead and ask the question, Robert.
So the question is, on the finance report, on page 13, I don't know if Long is here with us or not, and the chief, where it talked about under the general fund revenue, and it specifically referring to the property tax. And I noticed that the actually, I'm sorry, I got to get my other glasses, showing that there was on the actual versus budget, and it shows about a 17 million. And so my question was, is there a schedule of when the property taxes come in throughout the year? Is there at certain dates that those taxes actually come through? Because it's showing a shortfall, assuming if I'm reading this right. So I'm just wondering, between now and the end of that fiscal year, are we expecting to get that deficit kind of absorbed with property taxes?
I can answer that. The San Mateo County, they do have a schedule that they disperse the property tax to us. They usually disperse 45% of the property tax in November, December timeframe.
Mhm.
Then they revalue and disperse the rest in December. Then the next portion is received in May timeframe is the other 45%. So during that 2-year period, we get the whole pretty much the chunk of the majority chunk of those.
So
We're expecting receipts of about 20-something millions for property tax in May.
okay. So it's December and then May
Yes.
is the timeframe. Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, Robert, I think, when you pay your tax bill, it's for December 10th and April 10th. And so it's the payments that come in after those deadlines.
Thank you.
If that's the only question, then anybody want to pull off anything from the consent calendar? Okay, we have a motion. Michelle, will you take the roll call, please?
Sure. Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Bernstein.
Aye. I made a mistake a minute ago, and I just want to step back so we don't lose track of it in case somebody is on the call. Um, In terms of the presentation by Francine, I didn't ask for any public comments or questions, so I'm going to just take a step backward for a second and ask if anybody from the public would like to ask a question regarding the presentation that Francine made.
And if anybody does have a public comment, you could raise your hand or you could press *9 if you called in. And seeing none, Director Bernstein, you may continue.
Okay, thank you. So we'll proceed then to the regular agenda. And item number 8 is the needs for a possible replacement of the PG&E training facility. Chief, would you like to speak to that? There's a staff
Sure.
report here.
Yeah, Director Bernstein and board members, this staff report is generated really out of the discussion that occurred at our last meeting. And a lot of that has to do with PG&E giving us kind of some informal notice that at some point in time, we're likely going to have to vacate the western portion of what they call the Ravenswood substation property. We call it our Dumbarton Training Center or our USAR training site. So that was something, again, when it came up early on in my tenure here, I let the board know just because it seemed like it could be a significant issue for us. So, and then I think that's caused quite a bit of conversation amongst our board as you're looking out for our interests and trying to figure out how we can mitigate those, space challenges out there. So what I tried to focus on was exactly what we have out there at the site as far as space is concerned, what we anticipate timing wise, and really to give you kind of a sense of whether there's any urgency to it or not as much. And so now that we've had a little bit of time and space, we all know that the grid is growing, certainly in California, and with California's desire to electrify, the issue is probably only going to get probably more challenging for us out there. I know with Meta expanding and a lot of development in that corridor out there, PG&E is having to expand their services. And so they've kind of, again, informally noticed us that they will probably need to expand into our site. The informal window they gave us is 6 to 12 months. It could be much longer than that. But in the meantime, as we have a chance to kind of take a look at what we have out there, and for the mid to longer term, we anticipate being able to keep the eastern portion where we primarily have our USAR props and other training things. We're looking at opportunities to try and consolidate our equipment out there and identify and prioritize our needs. I think for us, we recognize that site has such unique qualities that we can't find anywhere else in the Bay Area. And that's because it's in such a highly industrialized area and not in close proximity to any residences. We're able to do what we call Class A burning of hay and wood that puts up thick black smoke, and we don't generally get much in the way of complaints. So it's been a great opportunity for us. So that is in essence what the staff report talks about is right now, Chief Ellis and his crews out there are slowly starting to do some cleanup on that west portion of the site. If and when PG&E asks for it back, we're supposed to return it to them in the condition we found it. So they're just starting to do some general cleanup there. In the longer term, we'll probably identify an area on the eastern portion where we can relocate those burn boxes that we've invested some time and energy in and locating on the western side, and we'll consolidate over there. Longer term, my guess is that PG&E will keep expanding, and our opportunities to do the burning like we are able to do may just go away in the Bay Area altogether. There's less tolerance from it from air pollution control districts. There's less tolerance from the community, and we'll have to figure out a way to do it with what we call Class B flammables. Usually it's a propane or natural gas props. But we'll still need to figure out where we can relocate our training facility and site for our urban search and rescue team. And then I try and identify in the report some areas of opportunity. And like I said, that one out there is perfect for us because it's really undevelopable except by PG&E. Yeah, if we can find highly industrialized areas where nobody would build and that aren't suitable for building, but that might be appropriate for us, those would be areas that we would look at. Both because they're usually not in close proximity to residential structures, and also usually, because the land is semi-impaired, it's much less expensive. And just part of it, and I didn't write it in here, but just an acknowledgement that we do have some space that's set aside that we purchased from the seminary adjacent to 300 Middlefield. And when we get to that point in our planning process, I believe we have the space to actually have some training facilities there that will replace, at least in part, some of what we're going to end up losing on the west side. So that is the essence of my report. There were some aerial maps in there that just gave you an idea of the aerial overview of what the site looked like out there. And really the purpose of it was to give you some basis for conversation as we look towards look forward in the future. Specifically was avoiding talking about any specific sites. I know there are some things that are certainly in the papers, in the press, and I did not address those specifically in here. Anyway, with that, open to any questions and looking forward to the conversation.
Board comments or questions? Rob, I see your hand up.
Yeah, Chuck, directed to the chief. Chief, according to the report, it says in here that our current Task Force 3 training facility is 2.1 acres. Are there any areas in Menlo Park that could accommodate Task Force 3 as a training facility to include, let's say if we wanted to include a motor pool there within our fire district?
Sure. I mean, the site that's certainly been talked about in the press is the one adjacent to Flood Park. It's the old Flood School site, where the Ravenswood School District has put out an RFP for some high density affordable housing. And that's a site that's, I think, 2.5 acres. I won't comment on what the, political or neighborhood challenges are, whether or not we'd be a better neighbor or not, I don't know. So it's interesting. Everyone loves the fire department. They usually don't love the fire department right next door to them. So.
Well, thank you for your candor, Chief.
Sure.
It is the size of our current Task Force 3, and we have our small motor pool facility over at Station 77. So it'd be, I don't know, an idea in order to combine both those areas. And I saw in the report here that conventional burning that we're doing, we're going to have to go, as you just said, to propane. So we won't be actually burning, I don't know, hay or wood or whatever they were doing out there. So I don't know what the environmental issues are relative to that 2.5 acreage, but it appears to be the largest parcel within Menlo Park that we could utilize as either a training facility for Task Force 3 or for our own training facility. Include some of our motor pool there, or even if we could use it in a combined, making combined Station 1 and Station 5 and use the current location for Station 1 as a training facility. So I think that that 2.5 parcel gives us a little bit of flexibility relative to our needs as a fire district. And we're looking, as you said, 6 to 12 months. And that's a pretty short window for us to try to find a place to train our firefighters.
Jim, go ahead, please.
For the chief, is the Station 1 site adequate to accommodate some or all of the training activities that go on out there now at the PG&E site?
I think what we would find at the Station 1 site, well, that the USAR training we would not locate it there at Station 1. But what we would do is, let's just assume someday we're no longer able to burn like we do out at the Dumbarton site. The proposal to put in a training tower that may or may not have some Class B propane props in it. There's adequate space out there for us to be able to do that training. I think we'll always utilize a variety of sites with some of our partner agencies, but there's adequate space there for us to accommodate a lot of our training needs. If suddenly there was this clean 2.5 acre slate for us, and the community wouldn't be against what we do on our USAR training. I mean, we could relocate that virtually anywhere. We don't put up a lot of black smoke, but it's not always the quietest operation when we're breaking concrete or using thermal torches to get through steel and concrete. Space wise, that's great. The location wise for a centralized training center isn't perfect for us, for rotating engine companies through, just because of its location on the far end and up against the freeway. It's not as good as that Station 1 site, for us having centralized training, but there are certainly some opportunities there.
Thank you.
Virginia?
Chief, so it doesn't sound like it, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's going to be absolutely crucial that all of these, that we have one big site. Is that correct?
It's not crucial. Is it optimal? Sure. But I think we'll probably, we're always good at cobbling things together and making things work. Just like even with that 6 to 12 month window, in the absence of moving to someplace else, we will squeeze what we need into the existing site at Dumbarton until we're finally kicked out of there altogether. And it's just, I think that's a matter of time, being pragmatic and just knowing that the grid is going to keep expanding. PG&E is going to need to expand.
I was just, oh, go on, sorry.
I was going to say that, it's interesting. We're looking at some other opportunities, whether they're viable or not. I don't know. I was just out taking a tour of Slack with John Johnston, our fire marshal today. They've got a lot of space. I recognize that that's on leased land, it's federal property, but at one point in time, there was actually conversation to relocate our urban search and rescue warehouse out there. So maybe there's opportunities in some other places. So we're actively, not aggressively, but actively on the lookout for opportunities where we might be able to work some things out.
Well, I would say that I would prefer to keep it all within the district, even though the Task Force 3 group is made up of people from, or agencies from throughout the area. So that would be my ideal situation. I think that if we were to look at that flood park, or it's not flood park, what exactly is the actual name of that area?
Flood school.
Flood school. If we were to look at that, I would definitely want to do major public outreach, because it is kind of a residential neighborhood too. And I know that the city of Menlo Park is looking at, different housing options as well. So I don't know, what the situation is, but if we were to look at that as an option, that area, what time frame are we even looking at for adequate public input? I don't know if y'all can hear me.
Chief, you're on mute.
On mute, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, and I don't know
Mark,
if
you were
the,
on
yeah, the question was directed to me. So it's, I mean, it's very interesting, obviously, without trying to dip my toes into the political realm. I mean, I know the Ravenswood School District put out an RFP for proposals that were due late last year. So, I know it's whatever part of Menlo Park's housing element. So there's a lot of fingers in that property right now. And to be honest with you, I don't even know how we would go about having those conversations. And I think Ravenswood was not interested initially in selling it. They wanted to do a land lease to the tune of $660,000 per year. So, as far as, I don't know if it's the cart before the horse with having some kind of outreach, but we would have to certainly do some due diligence and see where that RFP is in the process, if they have a development agreement, whatever the interactions would be with the city of Menlo Park.
Okay, yeah, okay, great,
Because
thank
I know
you.
a
Give
whole
me,
bunch of I don't knows there.
well, the one thing we do know is that it seems to be in multiple jurisdictions, so there are lots of stakeholders, it sounds like.
Rob, I want to ask a question before you, I know, I see your hand, but I want to ask a question first. Chief, you were talking about the training and what the future may hold for training, and that your guess was it would be unlikely that we would be able to continue to burn smoky types of materials for very much longer. But I wanted to ask you about how critical the concrete rubble pile was for the USAR training. Is that an essential thing, or is that just a kind of a nice to have?
So I'm new to the FEMA task force things. We had a state type 3 urban search and rescue team in my prior organization. And we had a rubble pile that was used frequently by our state team. And beyond that, we also had opportunities for trench rescue out at that site. And a lot of high and low angle rescue things. So all of those things are pretty critical in staying current for the teams and to maintain their skills, even though isn't exercised out there on a daily basis like we do with the fire boxes out there. It's pretty important having a facility like that so that the teams can exercise all of their skills.
Would you foresee us moving when we have a training facility, if we do, on Middlefield? Would you see us moving that rubble pile to the Middlefield Road site?
No, I don't envision that. I don't envision the space for that. So our Middlefield, again, this is probably a little bit premature, but it could potentially be a campus for all of our admin and that headquarters fire station on one site to house everyone, and also have the ability to have some training classrooms, a training prop, a good sized meeting room for the board. There's not room for a USAR rubble pile there on that site, nor is it necessarily, that the land there is incredibly expensive. I don't remember what we paid for that extra acre, but it was quite a bit. I don't know that that's the most prudent use of our money for something like a rubble pile. When it's, like I said, if it was on my wish list, I'd find what I call an impaired piece of property, one that's just really not suitable for development or building, that no one else would really want to own. And then that's a perfect place for a bunch of concrete and for firefighters to make a lot of noise and things like that, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Rob, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chip.
And let me
Chief-
just say, let me stop you for 1 second. I
Yeah.
see Renee's hand up, but Renee, I'm going to go through the board first, and then I'm going to go to the public, and I'll acknowledge you then.
All right, thanks, Chuck. Chief, so the only commitment we don't have a commitment from the SLAC, do we? That they're willing to move to,
Oh, no,
Are-
no. I was thinking out
Uh-huh.
loud.
no, I didn't think that they would commit to anything there. So the only true commitment we have is the property next door to Station One, that's about an acre there. And then, of course, we have Station One. Is that less than an acre or more than an acre there, that whole facility?
Yeah, I do not know what the current footprint of Station One is, but yeah, you're right. We purchased an acre. I don't know what the other size of that existing parcel is. It looks like a little bit more than an acre to me.
Yeah. No, the thing that I'm trying to get to here is that we have a 6 to 12-month window. Training is a critical element in what we do as a fire agency. We have limited amount of fires, and we have a young manpower source of firefighters that need the training, and training is so important to have. The thing that concerns me is that we have, with the current location over at EPA, Chief, would that work for a short time as a training facility there, if we needed to use it?
In our existing site, is that what you're talking about? I mean,
Yeah.
at the Dumbarton site? Are you talking about by the warehouse?
Yeah, if we could
Oh.
move some of that stuff over there or something
So,
temporarily.
I think what I'm
even-
trying to say is in the short term, if we get, if we are told that we need to vacate the 1.6 acres that we currently have dedicated to live fire training out at Dumbarton, we're going to figure out a way in the short term to squeeze everything we need to onto the 2.1 acres that we will still
Okay.
have.
All right,
And we'll make it work, you
Okay.
know? So it's not as urgent as it seems with that 6 to 12-month window. It's,
okay,
our guys are already kind of troubleshooting it and trying to figure out what things are underutilized out there. I mean, you know, firefighters given 4.1 acres of space will fill it all, and we have. And so now, you know, if we have 2.1 acres and we need to prioritize what we need out there, we will, and we'll make it work. We do know that we do expect that longer term, you know, PG&E is going to want the entire thing. So we need to plan longer term for figuring out where that goes.
okay, so, yeah, I'll take, your expertise and your advice that we can still utilize our current Task Force 3 there. What is it? What is a 2.1 acres or to move whatever training we need to do until we can, I don't know, find a site. I don't see where we're going to find anything within Medlow Park or even within our district, but as long as we have an alternative, Chief, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from board members? Okay, I will open up to public comment at this point. So Michelle, could you call for public comment? And after you do that, I'm going to acknowledge Renee Spooner as a speaker.
Yes, if any member of the public wishes to speak, please use the raise hand feature. You can press *9 on your phone if you called in. And we do have Renee Spooner ready to give her public comment.
Okay,
Thank you, Chief, and everybody on the board. Some of us Suburban Park residents did meet with the developer who had supplied an RFP to the Ravenswood School District we met with them on April 6th of this year, just a few weeks ago. And one of the caveats they said is that the fire board or the fire district or the fire marshal would need to approve the kind of egress into that particular site. So it's an interesting circle where they need fire district approval about the number of parking spaces and the number of entrances, exits out of that location if they were to build And so I was wondering if anybody on this board has been contacted by the Alliance Strategic Developers regarding that.
Normally, Renee, we don't respond to public comment,
Okay,
that would be a question that you probably would want to direct to the fire marshal, and normally
Okay.
the board would not know about that. And again, our rules are that we're not supposed to engage in a back and forth with the public, but simply to hear your comments.
so I guess my comment is we're as interested about the different jurisdictions all looking at that site. And thank you for considering it.
Any additional public comments?
We have no more public comments, Director Bernstein.
Okay. And any other board comments at this point?
Chuck,
Yes,
oh,
go ahead.
just a quick question. Is this gonna, are we gonna bring this back again on to another agenda as time kind of ticks away?
Well,
Is that what y'all are planning? I mean, I think that as we continue to kind of look for alternative sites or a site or sites, it'd be good to just give updates. And maybe all we need is a chief's report, an update in the chief's report. But I don't know, I just want us to be as open-minded as possible, right, in terms of use and alternatives.
this was an agenda item that had been requested by Rob Solano that we'd agreed at our last meeting to put on our agenda
Right, I
now.
seconded that motion,
Yeah.
yes.
And at this point, unless a board member were to propose it or something, I don't see it coming back to us at this point. But it's certainly something that the chief could bring back if he were so moved or whatever. But when you said you all like there's some big decision
No,
making.
no, meaning you and Rob do the agenda setting. That's why, that's what I
Right.
meant.
Well,
Chuck,
yes,
yeah.
go ahead, Rob.
yeah, this, since we are looking for a site, this could go, Jim chairs the strategic planning, and this could be a strategic planning topic that we on strategic planning could look out, maybe not this particular location, but other locations that the chief and his staff could come up with for us. So it might be a committee agenda item for strategic planning.
Okay. Any case, at this point, Virginia, there's no plans at all.
Okay, thank you.
I do have a comment though, and I have to say that I empathize with this area in Menlo Park. I am not a fan of dense housing. And it's one of those things that I live right near the old Whiskey Gulch, or what do they call it, University Circle, where we're probably going to get a proposal soon to triple or quadruple the density of all those rental units in there. And, I think it's kind of a sad day when neighbors might prefer to have smoky noise and piles of rubble as their neighbor than they would dense housing. But I feel the same way, and I'm sorry it's come to that. And- Yes, go ahead, Rob. Or Jim, was it Jim?
It's just final thing. I agree with Rob that, and I believe Virginia as well, that training is so crucial to what we do, and PG&E has put us on notice that they will reoccupy that spot, and time may or may not be on our side. We may not have the luxury of time. So I regard this as kind of an A-list item for the district.
Priority.
So I will take it up in the, if there's no opposition, and I'll take it up in the strategic planning commission and engage the chief in that discussion, available sites, evaluating need, and, just how can we support the chief in his quest to find that replacement site.
I agree with that, Jim. I mean, training is, to me, one of the most basic and important things that we do. I mean, that's the way that our crews can get, to serve our public, actually, to serve all of our serve our entire community. I mean, do you need a motion or direction, Chief, for us to just direct this topic to go back into committee at the Strategic Planning Committee? And then have them take it up and then bring it back to the board as they see fit? Would you, if you want that direction, if you'd like that motion, I'd be happy to make that.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't believe it's necessary. We certainly hear the direction and the
Okay.
committee, I think.
Well,
can
I
take those
just-
things up.
I'm just want to make sure it doesn't fall off of our radar. That's
Oh, it will
all.
not. Yeah, I just would like to express my deep appreciation to the board and their support for our needs for train. So really appreciate that. Hear that loud and clear.
Okay.
I'm already getting text messages with ideas of possible locations, which is great.
Yeah.
Thank
Sure.
you.
Well, and I'd like to just add though, and Jim, I hope you'll consider this for the strategic planning agenda also, for us to somehow rationalize the use of the space we have. I know we tried to get a study done to help us understand how we can do that, but we got a piece of garbage from the consultant and it didn't really answer any of our questions. But this idea of having a little training at Station 1, having a little training at Station 77, having a little, here and there. At some point, we ought to figure out how we want to use our space. Do we need all this space? What are we going to do with it? And how could we have a consolidated, coherent plan for those needs? And I think the chief, we may need two different sites. In other words, there may be clean kind of training and there may be really dirty kind of training, and two sites might make sense in that regard. But to have 3 or 4 sites really doesn't make sense. So I hope you'll put that space planning in general on the agenda for strategic planning.
Will
Sure.
do.
Okay, and Rob, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. Now, as we've all said, training is essential in the type of business that we're in here with fire. And as Virginia said, it's imperative that we have pretty much all our training all at one place. This fragmented, we're going to do, training over here with this classroom. We got a classroom over here to do live fire. We're doing it. I mean, what we really need to do is have a complete facility that just deals with training. Now, Task Force 3 is where it's located over at EPA, basically fits that mold there. I mean, it's all inclusive. It's got storage and everything else. And, we could have it. Now, I don't know if we could do live fire there, but as you said, we need to assess what we have as a property inventory and facilities inventory to find out how we can best utilize our facilities. But we need to have an all on-site training facility for sure. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments on this item from the board? Okay, then let's move on, please, to item number 9, which is the preliminary budget and staffing levels for the new 22-23 fiscal year.
Got it. Thank you, Director Bernstein, and again, members of the board. I am going to kind of go over this and give you an overview and then hopefully open it up to questions and have Long Lam answer whatever questions you have. So in front of you, you have a pretty thick report with our preliminary budget and some information that comes along with it. I'm not going to read numbers. Instead, what I'm going to do is kind of give you a little bit of some of the history on this, because it's a kind of a new process for us this year. And Yeah, we presented this to the, excuse me, the Finance Committee a couple weeks ago and improved the process, but it started with the board's desire for transparency and also for us, we published our budget calendar in advance. And now we're giving the board and the public a look at our preliminary budget, proposed budget, in advance of our May and June hearings on that exact budget. Excuse me. So on April 4th, we received some feedback from the Finance Committee, and based on the feedback, we added, as you'll see in the report, we have a number of programs. We added program descriptions. There was lots of questions about what the programs were about. So we've added some detail with program descriptions and as well as some detail on some significant changes in the budgets and also kind of some detail on overtime as it relates to those programs. Yeah, that was probably one of a lot of questions, and there's always questions as it relates to overtime. We're sensitive to it. You know, I think there's going to be certainly some deeper dives into some of those things, and we look forward to the opportunity to providing you more information and additional data. I will say in this process, it's certainly not perfect. It is one of the steps that we're going to take into making our budget process more transparent, easy to read, easier for lay people to digest and understand. And so it is certainly a step, but it is not the complete wholesale change that people probably would like to see right away. But my request is to the board and the public is bear with us. We're working on making the program and the budget process better and more transparent. I think this is a good start to getting us there. Some of the things I just wanted to talk about as an overview are some of our assumptions that we made in the budget. This has been we've had a number of conversations on our revenue assumptions. Where we ended up was an overall property tax revenue assumption of a 5% increase over prior year. Our RDA revenues we're expecting to be up by 47%, and our total revenues are up 6.6 over the prior year. So that in prior years past, we've had a little bit more conservative estimates. We're being a little bit more aggressive on our estimates. I think that won't create any problems for us. Ultimately, we could even potentially increase those numbers, but here's what we're presenting to you tonight is it is a balanced budget, and we don't spend every ounce of our revenues on current year operating expenses. Instead, we have really applied our prior year's experience, taken into consideration inflation and whatever salary changes we've had. There's not new programs per se. And then what we've done is we've taken and identified a good chunk of our current year revenues, and we're setting them aside for capital improvements, which we believe is prudent as we've got some big projects ahead of us. Which brings me to one of the things that we'll need to talk about as the year progresses, and we don't need to make the decision tonight or even in May or June necessarily, is what do we want to do with some of our excess revenues, whether, we certainly have historically, let me change to the page. If you look at page 48 in your report, where we are talking about our CalPERS UAL annual payments, we have budgeted to continue making those. You can see we also have an amount budgeted for excess payments. And this is one of those philosophical conversations that I think it would be prudent to have with the Finance Committee at some point in time in the future, and then with the larger board as a whole. Talk about how much of our funds do we want to continue to pay down that optional excess payment? How much do we want to set aside for our Station 1 headquarters project So potentially that we don't have to float any kind of bond or take any kind of debt. So we will come back to you with information so the board can make an informed decision. It'll be based on what, probably what provides the greatest value for us. I think we still have some due diligence to do to find out what the return on our investment is when we pay down our pension debt versus setting aside that money and not having to issue any kind of bonds. So one other item that I wanted to just point out is on the FTEs, which you'll see on, I don't have a page number, but it's the first page after page 52. On my packet, I don't have a number at the bottom. I just wanted to highlight that there is no proposal to add additional FTEs this year. In fact, we're going down one net FTE, and that is a result of the expiration of the contract with Meta for that one public service assistant. And the three positions that you see being changed on there is a reclassification request. What we're requesting is that we reclassify 3 firefighters to fire captains. And the reason for this is that our rescue is currently staffed on a daily basis with what we call an acting captain and 1 firefighter paramedic. And so what we'd like to do is make that supervision permanent. And the costs to us are not significant to change that. There's some additional benefit costs. We're filling that position on a daily basis with overtime at the higher acting captain rate. So that's all of our asks on FTEs. Like I said, as you look through the program budgets, they are numerous. There's 40 I counted. Our goal next year is to consolidate those programs into logical places. I think that was one of the constructive criticisms we had from the finance committee, and my ask was give us the opportunity to fix that over the course of the next year. I know it's not as clean as it can be or as easy to read, but we will come back next year with some logical places to consolidate those programs, and next year present an even better looking and easier to read budget. I won't say the underlying numbers in the budget are sound and secure and reasonable. But with that, I would like to turn it over for questions. I don't know, Long, if you have anything specifically you want to add or if you want to wait for questions, but.
No, nothing to add. I think you touched on most of the items.
Got it. So with that, really would like to open it to the board. I know Director Bernstein has some requests about kind of divvying up and looking a little deeper at some of the programs in the budget. So I will turn it back over to you, Director.
Yeah, before we do the questions, if you wouldn't mind, I'd like to go to the process and then take questions on everything. So if I could ask the directors to turn to page 96 of the packet. I have put a memo in here about a recommended process, but I'm certainly open to any modifications. Basically, I've put 6 steps in here. The first one is simply for everybody to read this, and it's kind of eye-opening. This is the first time that we've ever had a look at the details of the budget, or at least the first time I've ever had a look at the details of the budget. And I'd love to have, all the board members take a look at it. I think it would be helpful if tonight, if you've had a chance to look at it, and if you have questions, that you could raise them now. That would help the staff know what other things we'll be looking into. So I'm talking about step 2 now, which is to talk about any particular changes you're thinking are important, but it would just allow the staff to be more prepared for what we're going to do in May. And then I basically kind of as a combined effort, the district staff divided this up by the various committees, and I made some adjustments also based on what I knew. And so if you look on page 97, that's attachment A of this memo, you'll see my proposal for how we could consider it. And I just want to be clear that I expect all of us to be able to discuss all aspects of the budget. This was just to allow us to focus in at a committee level and to divide the budget into areas that related in general, it's not perfect, but in general, it relates to the missions of each committee. And so if each committee at their May meeting could look into these specific budget items, and if each page in the budget refers to one of these, they call them programs, but they're not all programs. Some are just little pieces of things like fitness or explorer or cadets, or ropes or saws. I mean, there's little pieces of things, but if everybody looked at this in their committee, we'd know that every budget item got a fairly intensive examination. But that doesn't stop anyone from bringing up something that was not in one of their committee meetings. So nobody's going to be precluded from that. So that's what we do. Step 3 would be to discuss these in the committees. Step 4 would be that we would discuss this whole budget at our May meeting and come up with a preliminary budget. That is, we'd try to iron out as much as we could, resolve any differences, take votes on things where there may or may not be disagreement, and then put that budget up for the required sunshine examination by the public. So the public has between May and June to look at that, to bring up issues and so forth. And then in June, we'd vote on the final budget. So that's what I'm proposing as a process. If somebody has another idea or thinks I've missed something, I think this would be a great time to bring that up. Go ahead, Robert.
Points of clarification here. The information that was put in the budget was pretty straightforward, and I looked at each one of them. This process, looking at your attachment that you put in, points of clarification need to be in order. And particularly when it comes around to, for me, kind of understanding your definitions of your terms. On item on page 96, you, in your memo, you, for example, you have on the Emergency Preparedness Committee, you indicated that focus on operations, the here and now on formal emergencies. And so I got a different take as to what the Emergency Preparedness Committee focus was. And so just like in Strategic Planning Committee, you mentioned strategic implementation, implications, and I'm not sure what that really means in terms of anything that implies some type of strategic plan or process of going through a plan would be part of strategic planning, as well as the finance. You indicated that there was administrative matters, that the Finance Committee is going to focus on administrative matters rather than the numbers, the finance of the organization. So it's going to be looking at administrative kind of issues. And then, so that's the first part, to kind of get a better clarity on what that really means and what your thoughts are. And the last part, and I'll throw this out there, you can mull it all over. On the attachment A, I noticed on the emergency preparedness, for example, these areas, and I assume the staff that's associated with them, looking at what the committee in terms of purpose is defined to do. And then I looked on there's 2 items on the strategic planning. You have community preparedness and emergency management. Now, if I read this correctly, you're saying pretty much the things that we have worked on this year, you're saying that you're taking it out of the current emergency preparedness committee and putting it in strategic planning because it has this the terminology used, strategic implications. So I'm kind of confused as to where the committee is now, besides looking at, and kind of determine how many saws and ropes we may have, as to what do you just expect, what are the expectation that is currently under use and what is being proposed at this point in time. Because the community preparedness, the reports that is due, that we looked at, have been talking about and trying to figure it out. We got the community meeting coming up, and then also emergency management. So if emergency management is strategic planning activity, then I'm just trying to understand why there versus where it have been, at least this year, on the emergency preparedness.
So you've addressed the question to me, right, Robert? So you'd
Yeah,
like-
this is your report, so I'm
Yeah, okay.
sorry, I just kind of open-ended that, but yeah.
Let me say, first of all, what I put in the memo here, I wasn't in any way trying to describe what committees should do in general. That really wasn't the purpose. I was trying to divide up the workload here and basically explain the criteria I was using. The major thing in the lion's share of the budget is fire suppression and those kinds of things. And I was in fact making a distinction between emergencies that are our business, that is responding to an emergency call, and disaster preparedness, which my feeling was there's a lot of uncertainty about how we want to do that, where we should have that located and what should be done. And I felt that was, if I'm going to try to divide up the work somehow, otherwise everything falls under emergency preparedness, because so much of what we do is related to emergency preparedness. I mean, training, the truck academy could be under that. I put the truck academy under human resources. And you say, well, what's the relationship there? I was just trying to find a way to divide up the work and not overload any one committee. And I felt that if you look at strategic planning, they only have about 8 different areas where emergency preparedness has 50% more than that. They have 12. So I was just trying to find ways, reasons to deal with that. I mean, and the same thing with finance committee. It does say district administration, but where else? I mean, again, there's only 6 items under there, and I just felt I wanted to give something to the finance committee to help divide up the work. So it's not perfect alignment here. And obviously committees could deal with more than this. And there's absolutely no reason, by the way, that emergency preparedness couldn't take a look at community preparedness if it wanted to. I wasn't trying to preclude anything. I just wanted to make sure that every part of the budget was covered by at least one committee. So, I mean, that's the explanation, but it's not a perfect, it doesn't make complete sense. It just was a way to divide it up. But again, if you would like to deal with community preparedness or emergency management, I felt that's something we're having a meeting this week. I think there's a lot of issues about how we deal with that and who does it and so forth. And I felt that was of more strategic. Same things with things like this tactical medic and so forth. I mean, this is a medic that supports police departments. Well, I felt that related to our relationships with our communities, and there were some strategic issues about that and who should be paying for it. And so, again, I think even facilities could have gone under emergency preparedness because we want to know whether we have the right facilities. But I needed a way to break this stuff up into different areas. You're not precluded from dealing with any area you want to deal with. I just would like to make sure that you deal with all the areas that would be assigned to the committee. If the board feels that it would be important to move some of these items around, well, this would be the time to do that or to recommend that. But And frankly, I would say the chief and Long had slightly different thoughts about how to divide this up than I did. So in the end, I'm presenting to you a modification of what the chief and Long did. That's really all the explanation that I can make. Rob, let me call on you.
Oh, you're on mute, Director Solano.
Thank you, Michelle. No, I like the starting point, Chuck, you know, that we have a starting point here to look. And I also like Robert's idea where we can kind of like flip flop and, you know, it's not really etched in stone and all our committees can maybe grasp a little bit of what we feel could fall into the different types of committees. So I think it's a good starting point. And I like Robert's suggestion where we could go into some of these other areas that may be with another, which is listed here as another committee. Thank you.
Jim?
Yeah, I just want to say, I like the concept. You know, we might want to, you know, revisit what each committee is charged with evaluating, but, you know, the budget is our most important budget. I'm sorry, the budget is our most important policy document. You know, it's where we put, you know, the district's money where our mouth is. So, you know, I like having, you know, the committees get a little more involved in the process. I think this is a good way to do that, to accomplish that. My thoughts.
Any other comments then? Well, I mean, I guess if we want to make a change in something, I'd like to hear a specific change and we could, you know, discuss it and take a vote on it. Or again, I don't think we need to preclude any committee from dealing with any other issue. I just like to make sure every committee deals with all the issues that are on its plate here, and then can take on anything else it would like to take on. So if the concern was, Robert, that there was some stuff you wanted to stay involved in, you certainly can stay involved in it at your committee. But you had so many things here already. I just didn't want to overload any one committee.
But Chuck, if I could make a suggestion, perhaps the regional training center could move to strategic planning. You know, we just discussed, you know, that committee looking at replacement site for the PG&E facility. So that might be
Come out of Regional Training Center, take it out of Human Resources Committee and move it into strategic planning?
right. And
Okay.
if, you know, again, I have no, you know, ownership over community preparedness or emergency management. If, you know, you know, that were to go back to EPREP, I don't have any objection to that.
That's fine.
Is anybody disagree with doing that? Okay, let's do that then. Chief, maybe you could answer. I don't even know exactly what regional training center means. Could you tell us what that means precisely?
Oh, what page is that? Well, never mind. It's in alphabetical order. Let me take a quick look
Yeah,
before I misspeak.
I didn't even know we had a regional training center. So
That's our Dumbarton site.
I see.
Oh, done. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's certainly on your agenda, on the Strategic Planning Committee's agenda, so it makes sense that that would be moved. Any other changes? Well, if not, could I have a motion then to accept with that change, accept this, this process?
I'll make that motion.
Chuck, I just have,
Can, wait, hang on
Uh,
one second, Rob. I'm looking for a second on the motion.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion from Jim and a second by Rob. Go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, the chief had mentioned something about a position, chief, that was an overtime position that you wanted to put. What was it again? With the, is it the rescue vehicles or?
Yeah, so this is,
Explain-
this is, whether it's with our actual rescue that's currently assigned to Station 2. And it's currently staffed with 2 people. It's staffed with a firefighter paramedic and what we call an acting fire captain. So that's either a firefighter or a driver that's moving up and working out of rank for the day. And so, and they're acting captains. So what we're proposing is to make that staffing and that leadership position permanent, so we can promote somebody into that position and not fill it with an acting position on a daily basis. So
Okay,
no new positions. It's just a reclassification of 3 firefighter allocations to become 3 captains allocations,
yeah, so we,
associated
Chuck's-
salary and costs. Yeah, sure.
thank you, chief. So Chuck, does that include our motion here to make those 2 acting positions permanent?
Well, that would be in the budget for the heavy rescue. So the heavy rescue would be scheduled to be discussed by whichever group, I think that's the
Emergency Preparedness Committee.
emergency preparedness, yeah. And anybody else could discuss it also, but it would be discussed by emergency preparedness at this point.
Well, I think that should go to HR too, because it is a position from acting to permanent.
Um, I'm sorry, who's chair of human resources?
I am.
Oh, so Rob, can you just bring that up as something you'd like to discuss also?
Yes, I'd like to discuss those 2 acting positions to make those permanent.
Okay, well, I'd like to just then leave it, but you're welcome to bring that up in your committee and discuss that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Any discussion then on Jim's motion here? Do we have any, we're going to come back and discuss the budget at greater length, but in terms of the process itself, is there any public input on the process of the budget?
If any member of the public wishes to give a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 on the phone if you called in. And Director Bernstein, I see none.
Okay, could we have a roll call vote then, please?
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Bernstein.
Aye. Okay, thank you very much. Let's return then to the whole budget and comments on the budget itself, questions, comments, anything that staff should be looking into or whatever between now and our May meetings. Jim?
The overtime expenditures, catch my eye. I know we've talked about it a little bit, and I've raised this issue in the past that when we're really not presented with an explanation or description of the work activities that are creating these very significant overtime expenditures. I don't know if it's operational, I don't know if it's callback, I don't know if it's backfill. I don't know if, intuitively, I would suspect some of it was generated by COVID, but I don't know how much. And again, I don't know what what activities increased to account for these, again, very significant year-over-year increases in overtime. I've raised this issue before that I get varying responses. Does our timekeeping system allow us to capture the work activities that are creating these expenditures? I haven't seen evidence that it does, and I think until we are able to learn the underlying causes for these increases, I don't know where you would begin to even attempt to control them without knowing what it is that's creating them. So, Chief, I don't know if you have any initial thoughts in this area. Again, given your very brief tenure.
Right. Sure, absolutely. And I appreciate the sensitivities, especially as it's related to overtime. And Long Lam and I talked about that specifically this morning and what we had available in our system for data. And I believe that we can provide a report to the entire board in time, well, hopefully in time for the committee meetings. We'll have to see what it actually looks like. That actually traces our actual overtime numbers back to the source. And it's, I may have said it at board meetings before, it's usually a good chunk of it is generated by personal time off, whether that's vacation or sick leave, some of it by industrial leave. You're right that I think we saw quite a big uptick in overtime caused by COVID leaves over the past year. We also have overtime that's generated by deployments that are reimbursable on federal and state fires. And then we have project overtime, and we will, in my conversations with Long, we believe we can generate a report that can give us the source of those and give us actual numbers and give you at least some level of comfort on our internal controls, and then we can put some eyes on it and see whether it's reasonable.
I'd like to piggyback on that comment. Chief, I understand the explanation that you gave, and I know that that's not a conclusion. You were just saying that it's reasonable to think that this has some relationship to deployments and COVID and this and that. But one of the positive things about getting this budget is it allowed us to look at overtime in a more granular level at each of the programs. And I'm looking, for example, at our budget for the fitness program, where in 2020-21, we spent $85 on overtime for fitness. And this year it's proposed that we spend $13,000 on overtime for fitness. And there's a point where, how shall I say it? It's embarrassing. It almost becomes simply embarrassing for me as an elected official to be asked to approve a budget that has overtime for fitness. And I'm guessing that it probably means somebody comes in on their day off to help train somebody on how to, I don't know, do the Stairmaster or whatever. But that's just, I feel almost subjected to ridicule for something like that. So I hope that not only will you have an explanation, but that you can take a scalpel to some of these things and eliminate it, because it feels like it's abusive to me. By the way, and I know I'm not in any way blaming the chief or Long on this. Long's job was simply to gather the inputs that he was given from the various people who head up these units. But I think as the district staff needs to take a more assertive role in judging some of this and saying, no, we're not going to do that on overtime anymore. And I think it's because some of our managers now are shift workers, and the shift workers are sleeping. You can't do administrative work at 3 a.m. So I think we have to find another solution. Maybe it's as Rob may have said, with contract workers, it may be that we assign it to a division chief who's working a regular schedule. I'm not sure what the action, what the action is. And frankly, it may even conflict with some of our desires to develop talent, but people simply cannot do administrative work when they're sleeping at 4 AM. So I think this overtime, if you looked, even, all these programs like buying saws or buying hose requires overtime. And that just shouldn't be. That should be a regular function done during the regular part of the day.
Sure, and if I can just, I think that would be valuable for us to break it down at the committee level and have some of the program managers explain. And I don't think there's anything in the budget that people aren't willing to share. That transparency will be good. It will also hopefully help all of us understand, what, like I said, what that overtime is related to, see if there's opportunities to eliminate it. Sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't, and there's always a challenge in trying to balance what we can do with on-duty resources and taking them out of service versus paying people on their day off to come in and do things. So it's one of those things that we try and juggle and manage. And we're, like I said, I am new to the district and happy to sit down and look with all of you and talk with our program managers about exactly what the budgeted expenses are.
Okay, Robert?
Yes, I have a question, if I may. If we're going to look at some information about, overtime, for me, it would be helpful to be able to kind of start looking at, again, those areas or areas that when we say overtime cost, what does that look like? Is it project related or is it staff related? And any other kind of area of service that may be required to do things beyond the normal course of a person's person or program normal mode of operation. So if we can get if part of, I'm hoping as part of the analysis, we'll look at it, whether it's project related or staff related, because they intertwine in terms of you have a project and you have a lot of people working on the project at a certain time, and you need all those individuals beyond their normal work hours doing this work, then you create that. So it's kind of getting an idea if it's the nature of the project itself, because if there are different projects, knowing what those projects are as it relates to the overtime. So it would be great to kind of get it sorted out like that for me.
Okay. Any other comments on budget or questions or anything?
Oh, one other thing, I think the hours too matters as well. If not only by category, but how many hours actually spent. If it gets down to, if you can get down to that granular level, it'd be great. If not, because the hours make a difference, as well. So.
I have a question, Chief, and it may be something that you alluded to earlier. On page 71 of the packet, you turn to page 71. This is the fire suppression program. The second to last bullet on the page talks about the PERS UAL and decreased by 2.2 million due to a different budget philosophy and so forth. Is this what you were referring to earlier, where you were recommending that we not pay down our excess liability?
That is, and we can go along and figure out what that number was derived from, but that is exactly what I was talking about. Right now, it's just a matter of either funding CIP or funding some of our excess revenues into that. But that's why you see the decrease there. It's not a commitment from us. It's just where we have the monies placed right now, paying down that moderately, and then putting a good chunk into CIP. And that is what we'll look for board direction on moving forward. And we'll come to you with some information so that you can make an informed decision on philosophically which direction you want to go.
Okay, let me just be clear here what your notion is, or at least maybe have you understand a difference here, which maybe being new here, you might not know about. We pay an excess in two different ways. We intentionally over budgeted the cost of CalPERS so that we in a sense collect from ourselves an additional percentage over and above what CalPERS is charging us. And that in theory is supposed to be set aside. It wasn't always set aside, but we've always made the commitment to fund that as a payment in excess of what our required payment is. But in addition to that, we also put in these lump sums, an extra $2, $3, or $5 million. When you put this in here, were you talking about even taking out the excess percentage, or were you only talking about taking out the excess payment over and above the percentage that's kind of a matter of policy at this point?
Long, I'm going to let you answer that because I got kind of lost on there. But I think it was, yeah. Long, go ahead and answer. And
Okay.
I can look at it. Yeah.
All right, so the budget philosophy this year was that any excess that we have, any access that wasn't allocated to the expenditures for the programs gets transferred to CIP this year instead of UAL last year. Last year, the direction was to put the excess in UAL to pay for the UAL liabilities. So this year, the fire chief wants the access, any budget access that wasn't allocated to programs to be allocated to CIP transfer instead of the UAL this year. So that's the reason why you're seeing a decrease this year. That's one of the reason why.
So let me restate just to make sure I'm absolutely clear. At this point, the only thing we would be budgeting is what we were required to pay by CalPERS for this year. Is that correct?
No. So there's two portions really. One is for the access payments that based on the budget philosophy that we usually budget a higher contribution rate than the normal CalPERS required contribution rate. The difference between those, the difference is gets lumped into the access payments right now. So that access payments is actually the budget philosophy that we're using from previous years as well. It's just the when we finalize the budget, there are access in terms of our budget savings, or our budget wasn't allocated to all the programs because we don't need it. So that access gets transferred to CIP this year instead of lumping it into the excess payments.
I see. So we would make a smaller payment in
Exactly.
excess that related to that 41% or whatever.
Exactly.
Okay, we would still make that, but we wouldn't make the additional amount that we've done
Exactly.
in past years. Okay, thank you. I just wanted to be sure I understood what was being proposed.
Right. And if I could make a comment, Director, I mean, I would be comfortable with reallocating all of the CIP into those excess payments, but I would like an opportunity to make a pitch to the board to say maybe we don't want to do that. Once we deposit it with CalPERS, there's never, we can never get it back to fund some of our capital projects. So in my mind, it seems prudent with a pretty large expenditure looming in the future to maybe take a pause on putting away optional monies into the CalPERS fund that we can't withdraw from, and maybe using it for the construction project. So that is kind of where I am. We can move it wherever the board is comfortable with philosophically, but I'd like to have that longer term conversation with the board before we actually write a check, an optional check to CalPERS and send that money away. That
And
makes
let me,
sense.
let me just comment. I don't disagree with that. I don't know. And it's one of the reasons that for, oh, I don't know, 5 or 6 years, I've been asking for a capital budget for these things so that we actually know how much cash we need and when we need it to do the things we want to do. So I hope we'll be able to get around to something like that. I'm talking about these major projects where we
Sure.
need to build a new station one, that's 10 million or $12 million or whatever. And we figure out what kind of a pot we need to do that in the time frame that we want to do it. So,
And we will have all of that this next year.
I think we had started down that road through this capital assessment that we did some years ago, that we had paid a consultant to come in and give us an idea of what, and he gave it 3 different scenarios as to the cost for each one of our projects. And so we never have, and from that, we know, I mean, we have a ballpark idea, cost may have gone up by now, with some that ballpark idea of what all of these combined projects are going to cost us. But we just never have gotten to the point of really allocating them. And I thank you, Chief, for bringing up this process for another process to look at how to begin to think in terms of putting money away, because we do have this excess money to come that we see that's there in different venues that we can start putting it away for these projects. So I'm glad we are now beginning to move on that or think about it. I should say we haven't acted on it, but move on it. So thank you for bringing it up, Chief.
okay. Any other comments on the budget? Question?
Director, if I can make just one comment, and it's just a kind of the mechanics of how we're going to make this work in the next step. I'm just anticipating that our committee meetings scheduled for the beginning of May, we might not be able to accomplish anything in the timeframes we have. So we might have to think about whatever that is to extend the periods and not stick with our normally scheduled meetings. Or maybe we have, I don't know, multiple parts.
Do you mean have more time? in the
Yes.
day, so that if the meeting ran to an hour and a half, we could do that?
I don't know the degree of which, since this is all new for us, and the level of information that the board members or committee members are going to want. It's very possible that the meetings are going to run over on top of each other.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think they should be scheduled with, perhaps 2 hours between them or something.
Okay. I'll
Okay.
work with the clerk and council on that.
Okay, I don't think we want to vote on this at this point. We voted on the process. I am going to ask the public, though, if there's any input from the public on the budget document. Anybody from the public like to speak on the budget document that we've been presented with?
If anybody from the public would like to speak, please raise your hand, or you can press *9 on your phone. And seeing none, Director Bernstein, you may continue.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me get caught up on my pages here. We're now moving to item number 10, which is the replacement of both mobile and portable radios for an amount not to exceed 2.5 million. Chief, will you?
I will take this, and I'm sure there'll be some conversation because this was also presented to the Strategic Planning Committee, which I believe is moving it forward with a recommendation for approval. So this is also one of those staff reports. Now, granted, I've been here a short period of time, but this is one of those staff reports that if there was a staff report Hall of Fame, it should at least have honorable mention. It was really well done. Just to give an overview on the scope of the project, this was something that was presented to me by Captain Mike Stahl a couple months ago. And it was really one of these things. It's currently included in the preliminary budget. We're moving it ahead outside of the budget schedule because it's important for a couple of reasons. And I'll have Captain Kelly get on and provide some answers to any questions you have in a little bit. But here's the couple of things that stuck out to me as Captain Stahl was making his presentation is that, predominantly when we have significant incidents with negative outcomes related to firefighters, whether it's injuries or fatalities, one of the key reasons is oftentimes communications. In this case, we are challenged with some of our communications with our neighboring agencies. Primarily, it's Palo Alto and it's Fremont, and they operate on a different spectrum of the radio frequencies. So in large part, we cannot communicate with them when we go on vehicle accidents. If we had a complex structure fire, there could be some significant communication challenges. So one of the proposals here is to upgrade our radios from single band to dual band radios so we can operate on our current VHF frequencies and then also on these 700 and 800 megahertz frequencies that law enforcement and a number of our local fire agencies operate on. The second thing that came up was our current radios, the Kenwoods, they're a general use radio. They are, they're not really rated for fires. You find them in a lot of public works uses. They're a typical lower cost radio. And as a result of the radios not being fire hardened, it can create some pretty significant safety problems. We saw it in the 2011 firefighter fatality in the city of San Francisco, where we had 2 firefighters perish. And one of the problems was that it was a kind of a flashover situation where they were caught in an excessive amount of heat, and they had similar radios and their hand mics melted in the open position, which created some significant communication problems with them. So it's interesting right now, our firefighters are trying to work around the challenge of not having a heat rated cord and hand mic by running it up through their turnouts so they can speak into it. So there are a number of reasons for this moving to this newer technology. It also has an emergency button that can be depressed that will tell the radio designation of the firefighter who has pressed that button at the BC vehicle, also in the communication center. There's a number of reasons. One of the reasons for moving it up ahead outside of budget schedule is that we also have 6 new engines and a ladder truck on their way and being prepared for delivery, I think in just the beginning of the fiscal year. With supply chain issues, we would like to get this order approved in advance, get the mobile radios for the new engines also ordered so that when our new engines and ladder truck arrive, they don't sit around waiting for radios. So that's part of the process too. With that, I'd kind of like to maybe let Director McLaughlin or Solano weigh in. Also open it up to any questions that you might have with Captain Kelly. Captain Stahl was not available on here, but I know he and Captain Kelly have worked hand in hand on this. And like I said, this really a very thorough report. And anyway, I'd like to open it up for questions or comments.
You're muted, Chuck.
Jim, yeah, did you want to address this?
No, I will. The Strategic Planning Committee heard this item, and I just want to start off offering kudos to Captain Kelly and Captain Stahl. They did a marvelous job of outlining the issues, and I thought they made a very compelling argument for replacing the current radio system. The issues that they cited, with some of the physical properties of the radios, the fact that they're beyond their life cycle, some of the difficulties communicating with other jurisdictions. There's there's one advantage after another to replace this equipment. And I left the meeting with somewhat of a sense of urgency to it. The vehicle replacement issue that the chief just cited, but like I say, being well beyond the scheduled life cycle for the equipment. So the committee unanimously supports the proposal. So Rob, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Oh, I think I think you've covered it all, Jim. The thing that kind of floored me was that, as the incident happened in 2011, that, this was just brought to us now for the replacement of this equipment. And I think, if I remember, that there were some dead spots that these new radios could be able to communicate in. So it's an equipment issue. It's actual radio frequency or digital frequencies that we need, and it's just overdue for replacement. So Jim and I felt that this needed to go forward as soon as possible. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay.
Director, if we could have an opportunity for Captain Kelly just to say a few words. I mean, I'd like to acknowledge the hard work of the folks behind the scene, and also, Randy, I don't know if you have a couple comments you'd like to share with the board, and then maybe they have some questions for you.
Yeah, please, Randy, go ahead, please.
Well, first, the lion's share of the work was done by Captain Stahl, and him seeing the need for the new radios. We've all seen it for a long time. It became very evident after San Francisco, and when one of the radios melted, and it locked out the whole tactical channel and unnecessarily complicated that fire scene. But the need has been there for a long time. This is a huge enhancement for us, and it'll allow us to communicate better, not only within the district in the dead spots, because the wattage on these radios are stronger, but also when we're responding with Fremont in Alameda County, as well as at the Santa Clara County Fire Departments.
Okay. Is that all then, Randy?
It is.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I had referred earlier to two excellent staff reports that I've seen, and one of them was this staff report. I thought it covered the basic issues. It answered the questions in advance so that we could read it and know what was going on. The other staff report that I thought was very well done is when we, and this came from captains, including Randy Kelly was involved in that report also. When we made the decision to replace 6 of our engines at one time and get on a cycle where if we were going to replace apparatus, we do it all at one time and it would be uniform and we could have the spare parts we needed that would, cover all the equipment at one time. And same thing with the radios. I think this idea of doing it all at one time, so there's full compatibility with everything. It allows us to take advantage of new technology rather than having half of our radios be of, one type and the other half being of another type and so forth. So I think it allowed us to get smarter about our whole purchasing cycle. And I'm delighted that came from, our firefighters who understood not only the technological needs for the equipment, but also that there was a better way to purchase it financially and so forth. So all of that I think is a positive, and I hope we continue to make progress in that direction. And I support these radios. It seems like it's something we should have done a couple of years ago, but the fact is we do it now. We're not too late to do it. We'll have it in time for the new engines. And we've taken a major step upwards. So I support this as well. Any other comments on this?
I think I want to ask the chief a question, as well as Long. Do we have the money? If we got the money, then I want to make a motion that we accept this report and purchase the equipment.
Yes, we do, Director. It's coming out of our designated, I think I'm going to say it right, the Equipment Reserves Fund. Is that right, Long?
Is coming out of the Equipment Replacement Reserve Fund, yes.
Got it. I was close.
Okay,
Yes,
so
we have the money.
I have a motion from Robert. Is there a second?
I'll second. But I have a question for
Yeah.
Mark.
Okay, I just want to record that Virginia seconded it. Go ahead, Virginia, please.
Hey, Mark, so what other kinds of things do you anticipate, like these issues where we might need to upgrade equipment, you anticipate we're gonna be facing in the near future? I'm just
Well,
thinking about it from a financial planning standpoint, and I mean,
Right. I don't,
this is what, this is $2.5 million, right?
yeah,
Up to, I think.
yeah, the 2.5 is broad, so I know we'll be under that. It's hopefully going to be much closer to 2. But yes, I appreciate your question. Like, how are we able to prioritize whatever our financial resources are for whatever's pending? I don't, we have an SCBA replacement that's in a couple years. That's going to be part of when I sit down and put pen to paper or put the spreadsheet together. That's going to be part of our capital replacement fund that I'll come to the board with in a few months. So we can take a look at those. I don't have a sense that there's anything urgently awaiting for us, kind of like this is right now. And then we can sit down and prioritize. But we have more than adequate funds in our reserve balances now to address this. Yeah, I'm not aware of anything that's going to be as urgent as this one.
Well, and I'm not suggesting that it's not urgent. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to balance the
Sure.
practice that we've had in terms of paying down our UAL little bit by little bit every year. And now it looks like we're being asked to a certain extent, at a minimum, not pay it down and possibly pay less of it down. And so we're just going to have to be making these choices, and that's fine. I mean, these are good choices to have, right?
Right.
But I'm just trying to figure out how we can, do as much as we can and maximize our
Right.
money. I
And
mean, I
that-
think we have to do that from a public perspective. I think the taxpayers and public definitely deserve that and expect that from us.
Right. So, and that will be part of the broader conversation that we have with the board on what the budget philosophies are with that UAL. Know that it is currently included in the preliminary budget. So the impact on our contributions to the UAL and the CIP, it's already been taken into consideration there. So this won't impact or impair those contributions anymore. But yes, I do recognize that these are all choices that the board needs to make.
Yeah, no, I just want to make sure that we're prepared, so that we're making the best financial management decisions.
Absolutely.
Well, but I'd like to tail onto that, Virginia, because 3 years ago, our overtime budget was about 4.5 million. This year, it's over 8 million. That's an increase of $3.5 million per year in overtime that I think is unnecessary. And what we're talking about here is a $2.5 million expenditure that is expected to last for 10 years. So this is I mean, the real question is, do we have enough money to be paying $3.5 million extra in overtime? And I think that would be a better question. So let's not lose sight of how we're spending our money here.
No, I'm not. I'm just trying to get the overall picture, Chuck. That's all I'm saying. I mean, I'm not disagreeing about the overtime issue. I'm just trying to make sure that we're getting the overall picture. That's why I brought it up from a financial planning perspective.
Okay, Any other comments or questions on this? I will then go to the public and see if there's any public comment on this item.
And if any members of the public have public comment, you could raise your hand, use the raise hand feature, or press *9 if you called in. And I see none.
Okay, so we have a motion and second. Could we have a roll call vote, please, Michelle?
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crawley,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin,
Aye.
Director Solano,
I,
Director Bernstein.
Aye, 5-0, the motion carries. Thank you, Captain Kelly, for your appearance here tonight and for your work on this project. We'll move now to item number 11.
Thank you, directors.
Welcome.
We'll move to item 11, which is
Thank you, Randy.
the relating to the signatories on our LAIF account.
Perfect. Director Bernstein, well, first of all, board, thank you for the support on the radio purchase. Very much appreciated. Speaking of financially good stewardship, that is exactly what item number 11 is. Been having some conversations with Long Lamb. He was mentioning trying to maximize our earnings on our cash in the bank. And we realized that we can't move our monies from our non-interest bearing accounts into the LAIF account because we don't have the proper signatures. So what this action will do is authorize changes in signatories for the LAIF account, allow us to move those monies. Long, in the meantime, is doing a cash flow analysis so that we can maximize. I recognize interest rates are low, but there is opportunity cost being lost right now. So we are going to start moving our money out of our non-interest bearing accounts and stick them over in LAIF and earn a little extra, very safe monies for the fire district. With that, any questions?
Any, I guess we'll need a motion for this. Could I have a motion to, or
I'll
it's a
make a motion.
resolution? Yeah.
make a motion.
Go ahead, Rob.
Second.
So Rob, you've made a motion to approve the resolution attached
sir.
to this.
And I
And
second it.
Virginia seconded. Okay, discussion. please.
I have a question. So the signatories, I know that currently what is posted here is the chief, the fire chief, the interim deputy chief, and the interim administrative service manager, which is Long. What if those individual, one or more of those individuals leave? Will we have to come back through and then put together another resolution authorizing that new person?
Yes, we'll do that. We
Will,
will do that, but that's the plan.
will it be more practical or feasible if we designate the positions, say like the fire chief, the deputy chief, and the service manager, the positions rather than the individuals, so that if they change, we wouldn't have to. We know that it's based upon the individuals in that position rather than the individuals themselves.
I would love to do that, but my guess is Long is going to tell us why we can't.
Oh, okay.
Directors, actually, the resolution did mention that in the clause, it says that there's a clause in that be it for the resolve that the following district officer holding the titles specified here and their successor in office are hereby authorized order of. So there is a clause in there
I missed
to,
that one.
yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
But I didn't understand that long. You were suggesting that what Robert was suggesting was acceptable, that we wouldn't have to name the names. We would just put in the name of the position.
Right, but well, the name of the positions or the successor in office. So the resolution did specifically include that clause in there. So if the positions, as long as the position is there, they can make the withdrawals or the disbursement.
I see. You're saying that's already in this resolution.
Yes, it is.
Could you just tell us where that is? I'm sorry, I don't, see-
So it's in
104.
the four.
104.
yeah, but which paragraph?
One,
So
two,
it would be I would say the
Number 4.
the fourth paragraph.
I see. I would just like to say here, well, let me just ask the question. Long, is this simply to move monies in and out of LAIF? Or is this a signature authority for moving money in all of the accounts?
This is just for LAIF. So LAIF requires us to have an official resolutions on file with them in order for them to recognize the signature authority for the district.
Okay. Let me just say, and this is just as a long-term thing, one of the cautions, at least when I went to business school, it was one of the things that we were always cautioned about, that you never had the same person writing the checks, who authorized the checks, who did the accounting. Unfortunately, Long, since you're the only person in the finance group, or almost the only person, you're doing all three of those functions, and I'm in no way being critical of you. I'm just saying that as soon as we possibly can, I would like to see these functions separated. I just think it's bad business to have the same person doing all three of those functions. Just because you're the only oversight in the group, or you're the senior oversight in the group, and you're also the doer in the group. So you're overseeing yourself. And in the long run, that isn't good for an organization. So as soon as we get somebody new in here, I hope you will work on ironing that out.
Sure.
Thank you. Any more comments on the motion? Anybody in the public like to speak to this motion?
And if anybody would like to speak on this item, please raise your hand, or you can press *9 on your phone. And I see none, Director Bernstein.
Okay, roll call vote, please, Michelle.
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crowley,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin,
Aye.
Director Solano.
Aye.
Director Bernstein.
Aye. Okay, the motion carries 5-0. Thank you. We'll move on to agenda item number 12. This item is from me. I have a proposed agenda for our special board meeting regarding volunteer organizations and and community preparedness that will take place on April 26th, the week from tonight. And that meeting is from 7 to 9 o'clock. And I've basically outlined 5 items for the agenda. The first and the fifth one are brief statements by the board. And the second, third, and fourth are really the substantive parts of the meeting. The second one has 30 minutes, up to 30 minutes. I don't think there'll be that much, but up to 30 minutes on any comments regarding the constant study. We've talked about that at several meetings already and some committee meetings. But if the public wanted to talk about that at all or address any of the things that were in that, they'd have an opportunity to do that. The third agenda item is where we would go to our recognized community volunteer groups for their comments on how best to support what they're doing, what kinds of organization we need, what kinds of staff we need, what kinds of budget we need to support them. And they would have up to 10 minutes each to make a statement. And then the fourth item would be where the general public could address the same things, limited to 3 minutes each for up to about 30 minutes. Again, I don't know if there would be 10 people there to talk about that or not. So there's basically 2 items on the agenda. I mean, the first is the constant study. And the second is how to support the volunteer groups and so forth. So this is what I'm proposing, and I'm open to any comments or suggestions for changes or whatever anybody would like to propose that's different than what's here. I can't decide which one to call on first here. So does anybody have any comments about this? If not, I'd like a motion to say, yeah, that agenda is acceptable. And go ahead, Rob.
Yeah, I think it's it's a starting point, and I think it flows, and it should be used as a source document. So I can make the motion if you want.
Make the motion to accept this as the agenda to be published.
Yes.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Jim seconded. And then comments. Hearing none, I'll go to the public comment. Any public comment on this agenda?
And if there are any public comments, please raise your hand or press star 9 if you called in. And I see none, Director Bernstein.
Okay, could we have a roll call vote then, please?
Director Jones,
Aye.
Director Crowley,
Aye.
Director McLaughlin,
Aye.
Director Solano,
Aye.
Director Bernstein.
Aye. Okay, so the motion carries 5-0. We have an agenda for the meeting, and Michelle, you'll publish this in the normal manner, I assume.
Of course, yes.
And then we have, I've got to come back to the other part here. We're going to go to the reports and requests from directors. Start with committee reports here. Emergency preparedness. Robert, you have a report?
No report. We didn't meet.
Okay. Human resources.
Yes, Robert and I met. We talked about the educational incentives for firefighters and the non-firefighters. And Francine is going to come up with some strategies for us for our next meeting. Robert, would you like to add anything?
No, Rob, you did an excellent job on that.
Thank you.
Okay. Strategic planning.
Rob and I met with the chief and Captain Stahl, their proposal to replace the radio equipment. And, I won't repeat everything that was said earlier this evening.
Okay, and Virginia, the Finance Committee.
Nothing to really report. I mean, everything we did tonight was from the Finance Committee. So thank you for approving all the things that we needed to get done and approved. Do you have anything to add to that, Chuck?
No, I think that's right. The liaison reports, Jim, Town of Atherton.
As you all know, we had a joint meeting with Atherton last week, and again, all of you were present, and I thought it was a very productive meeting. I want to thank all of the members of the town council who were there. It was a very active meeting. We really consumed 2 hours fairly quickly. It was a pretty robust discussion focused on emergency preparedness, emergency planning. Learned a great deal about what ADAPT is doing in Atherton. It was I thought, a very free and candid exchange of ideas and views. And I know Atherton will be participating in our meeting next week, our town hall meeting next week. So.
I had one comment, and this is probably for either the chief or Michelle, and that is that I know that the town worked hard to have a hybrid meeting that included both remote participants and in-person participants. And they struggled with the audio visual equipment and so forth. I hope that we could move toward that kind of an arrangement in the future where we get back to in-person meetings, but also allow the public to attend remotely. And we'll need to look at equipment. I don't know if any work's been done on that, but I would ask that that work begin on that so that we could do it without awkwardness and to ensure that people at home could hear well and so forth. As I understood, the people at home couldn't hear everybody all the time. And so it's hard to have a full participation meeting when you can't hear everything. And I know how hard it is because I have to do it with our schools and so forth. It's very hard to make all that work. And it requires some practice and rehearsal and testing of equipment and particularly microphones and so forth. Have we, Chief, have we done, are you aware of anything we've done to be able to enable that?
I'm not aware of anything, but I certainly hear the message and, you know, possibly the board's desire to figure out a way to have hybrids and keep it inclusive. So, and I certainly recognize the problems that we saw with Atherton. So, but it was a great system. I took a look at the video today, and it's fascinating how well it worked, minus the audio part.
What I took from that, because I'm sure everybody's on meetings all the time, Zoom meeting, without good mic systems, because I know they kept shuffling the mic around for people, and so that can become time consuming and annoying. And so it's just a matter of, if there's 5 people, you have 5 mics, so you don't have to shuffle them around. When you don't, then that's where the sound quality goes down at that point. So that's what I noticed.
Okay, I have the city of East Palo Alto, and I only have to report that I contacted the mayor, Ruben, to see if they were interested in a joint meeting similar to what we were going to do in did do in Atherton. And I know that they're in a difficult place right now where they've got an interim city manager, an interim police chief, and there's a lot of movement and so forth. So it may not be the right time, but I threw out some suggestions of things that could be discussed. And I did mention that we had a task force on water. I didn't want to just pick on East Palo Alto. That in the past, water problems have been cited there, but I believe there may also be water problems in Menlo Park as well. But I mentioned that and the alerting systems and some other things. So I have not heard back from them, and it's been a week or so since I contacted them, but I do expect to hear back at some point. That's all I had for Menlo Park. Although I'm sorry, I do have one other thing, and that it's an interesting development that was reported on by Lynn Bramlett, that the Menlo Park has recommended the hiring of an emergency coordinator for the city of Menlo Park. So that is a potential development for that city. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm doing 2 reports at the same time because I live in Menlo Park. I apologize. Virginia, you have Menlo Park.
Yeah, I don't really have that much. Ray Mueller and I very briefly just exchanged text, but I did talk to, I think, Mark, if I asked you if you were going to be able to talk to the city manager to see if, what they needed, or if we wanted to set up a meeting. I'm not sure if you had a chance to do that. I think it was a few weeks ago.
I have not, but it's going back on my to-do list.
Thank you. Yeah, and I guess I got the email from Lynn Bramlett as well. And so has the city manager discussed any of that with you, Chief? What they want to do in terms of their new hire?
I received a phone call from Dave Norris, their police chief, just giving me the heads up that they were putting in a budget request for that. I didn't get a good indication on whether or not that was initiated by him or a direction from city manager or staff, but he wasn't entirely sure whether or not it was going to be approved initially, but he was optimistic and was looking forward to coordinating with our folks, maybe even having some help from us on a hiring panel, and then just coordinating in some of that preparedness and planning on the city to district level. So,
Okay, well, if you would just keep us posted on that, I mean, that's obviously their staffing issue. But we're probably going to somehow be involved in that, just from the nature of the position.
Okay, excuse me, Rob, would you like to report on county contacts?
I have nothing to report.
Okay. And then the Emergency Medical Joint Powers Authority, is that you, Jim, or is that you, Virginia? I'm sorry.
Virginia.
Virginia, sorry.
Yeah, I don't have anything to report except that it sounds like they're going to have this meeting in May. So hopefully I'll have something to report at our May meeting. But right now I have nothing except that we're having this meeting in May, the quarterly meeting.
And let me just ask the question now, what would, Chief, you didn't report on any, in your report, anything there, but is it safe to say that we continue to not have serious issues with that?
was that on the ambulance transport? We have no issues right now with wall times or wait times for ambulances or coverage issues.
Okay, thank you. I know, Robert, you were going to make a report on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Ad Hoc Committee.
Yeah, I was. You still want me to?
Yes, please.
Okay. The group met on March 30th, 9:30, which composed of myself and Virginia as ad hoc committee members, and Francine and Chief Loren was there also. The committee objective was threefold. One, based upon the purpose statement that we sent out to everyone to get feedback on. And that was to look at the examiner framework, of which the basic structure of the DEI would gear itself around for successful recruiting, retaining employees, and advancing the best talents in an environment which promotes and encourages diversity, equity, and inclusion. The second part of that, the objective was to examine the strengths and weaknesses of the district structure and make recommendations that will empower leaders to better understand and manage the district's most valuable assets as people and their talent. And the third objective was to work with the work of the DEI committee would include working with the fire chief and district staff to develop strategies that support best practices in the realm of inclusion and diversity. What we accomplished at the meeting, and Virginia and Chief and Francine, you can pitch in on that. But what I saw that we were able to accomplish, the first thing was we discussed and came up with a metrics to help understand diversity, equity, and inclusion at the fire district and in their work environment. We also explored and developed a metrics that focus in on three major components. Those components focus in on employee life cycle, which will focus in on hiring, representation, retention, and advancement. The other one will focus on the employee experience, the satisfaction and engagement, employees resource group in terms of what kind of networking that goes on as within the district, and accessibility for opportunity. The third area metrics will focus on the district makeup, which is looking at leadership, And looking at supplies, that's another area. Who do we do business with? Are we diverse in our equal opportunity with our suppliers? The goal for the next step is to begin to identify data points in each of these diversity, equity, and inclusion metrics focus area that I just mentioned, and then determine the best methodology or method for collecting the data. And whether we need to, it needs to be an online survey, whether it be paper forms, or email questionnaire. We still have to kind of figure that out, and then bring some conclusion, make sure that we have all of the areas that we wanted to try to look at and try to measure. So that's pretty much where we are at this point. We have no recommendation to make it to the board at this point in time. We're still doing our discussing and shaping and formulating our process and how we're going to approach it. So, Virginia, Chief, Francine, you have any other comments on that?
I think we're off to a really good start. And Robert, thanks for all the hard work you've put into making the committee work and also bringing up the relevant issues. And so let's just see how we do. And Francine, you've done a great job as well. So thank you for all that y'all are doing, and Chief as well. Robert's really put a lot of work into this. And I mean, I'm just kind of there looking at whatever he asks me to look at, Robert. So thank you.
You're welcome. I think a lot of the strength and the backbone of work to be done, Francine, is going to be pivotal in that. And I think at some point we're in the Chief, and we got to really decide whether we need to, she have the time, whether we need to bring someone else in. But as we go down this road, I think it'll become clear if that's going to be the case. And I think that's when we'll probably come back to the board and say, hey, we need a little help in this area.
Yeah, and I think it'll be good for the board to hear about some of the things that we're doing. There's a lot of, definitions and good practices, best practices kind of things. So I'm actually looking forward to the time we can bring it to the board.
So the committee will meet on April the 7th. It's our next meeting, scheduled to dig a little deeper in this. So that's it.
Robert, just to be clear for anybody listening who might be interested, when you say the next meeting is April 27, do I assume correctly that just you and Virginia are meeting, or you're not holding a public meeting or anything? Is that right?
No, it's just the ad hoc committee, Virginia, myself, the Chief, and Francine.
Okay.
Or the team, I should say.
Okay.
Well, just to clarify, the ad hoc committee is Director Jones and Director Crawley
Right.
with invited guests. Thank you.
Correct.
Invited guest. Thank you, Michelle.
Right.
Thank you.
Jim, do you have anything on water companies and water pressure?
No, the ad hoc committee did not meet this month. We met last month with the chief and our fire marshal, John Johnston, and the fire marshal was going to do some research on some items, and we'll meet again when he has something to report to us.
Okay. And then the ambulance services.
I think that's you and Jim, right? That you're not talking about the ambulance JPA EMS meeting, right?
That's correct. It was Jim, and that's on hold at this point because
Right. We haven't had a meeting yet.
right. Okay. And I should have done this before, but we've gone through the committee reports, the liaison reports, and the ad hoc committee reports. Let me ask, as a matter of form here, are there any comments or any questions from the public relating to these items?
If any member of the public would like to provide a public comment, please use the raise hand feature or press *9 on your phone. And I see none, Director Bernstein.
Okay, thank you. I'll proceed then to reports and requests of directors. In fact, if you wouldn't mind, I'll just call on you. Virginia, do you have anything?
No.
Okay. Robert, do you have anything?
Not at this point, not
Okay.
at this time.
Jim, anything?
I do not, thank you.
And what about you, Rob?
No, I don't, thanks.
Okay. And in terms of president's report, I don't have anything that hasn't already been discussed. So we'll move on to public comment number 3 for items that were not on the agenda.
If any member of the public would like to provide public comment, you could use the raise hand feature or press *9 if you called in. And Director Bernstein, I want to draw your attention to agenda item number 18. We did receive a written public comment from an Alex, I can't pronounce his last name, K-E-H. but
Alex
it's all-
K.
K, it's all in,
Alex K.
and
Yeah.
thank you, and it's in your packet, and if you haven't already read it, you could read it when you get a moment.
Yeah, so basically, he was raising the idea of using any excess property we had at Station 3 as a public park. So that was his public input. And we also have an agenda item 19, which is a thank you note from Caltrain for the district's assistance for the accident that occurred in San Bruno. And that then is our whole agenda. We don't need a motion to adjourn, but I will just ask if there's any last items from staff that we should know about, our attorney or our chief or Michelle, or anything from any of the directors. If not, then the meeting's adjourned at 9:51.
Thank you.
Thank
Good night, everyone.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Bye.
Anyway.
Good
Take
night.
care.